All right. Good morning, Jordan. Maybe it's morning for you. It's morning for me, at least. This is section 7.4. And what we're going to be doing here is pretty much the same thing we did in the last section that you were here. We're adding and subtracting rational expressions, which again are just fancy fractions. And we're going to still use our lowest common denominator. This time we happen to have plus and minus signs in our denominator. So the first thing I want to do before I even start tackling this thing is I want to put brackets around my numerators and my denominators, just so I don't forget that those, like the p minus 1 travels as a group. Okay, so uh, because the way these are right now, we can easily find the non-permissible values, because that's the first thing we want to do is find the non-permissible values. Then we're going to find the lowest common denominator and then change our fractions and simplify. So for my non-permissible values, I know p minus 2 can't be 0 and p plus 1 can't be 0. So what that means is p can't be 2 and p can't be negative 1. Okay, so now that I've established that, we're going to find our lowest common denominator. So how we did this in the last section is we prime factored each number and then took the biggest power of each prime factor. Well, here p minus 2 is a factor and p plus 1 is a factor. So both of those are going to be part of my denominator. So p minus my lowest common denominator and p plus 1. And because there's no, like, p minus 2 doesn't show up in both places or they each just show up once, that's what our lowest common denominator happens to be. So this is a middle step, and in the next couple of questions I might skip this step out, but for now I'm going to write it. So what I need to do, oops, let's try that again. So I have p minus 2, my original fraction, and p minus 1. And then what I actually want to do here is I need to make my lowest common denominator, which is p plus 1, or p minus 2, p plus 1. So what I needed to do to my original denominator was multiply it by p plus 1. But since I do that to the bottom, my denominator, I have to do it to the top, my numerator. And then our second fraction, we originally had p plus 3 and over p plus 1. And in order to have a turn my p plus 1 into our lowest common denominator, I need to multiply the bottom times p minus 2. And similarly, if I do that to the bottom, I do that to the top. Okay, so now my lowest common denominator is p minus 2, p plus 1. You could have also written p plus 1, p minus 2. It doesn't matter the order because we know we can multiply in any order we want. So that means my numerator is p minus 1, p plus 1. And then I have p plus 3, p minus 2. And like I said, I usually skip, where's my pen? Whoops. I usually skip this step here. Okay, I usually skip it and then go straight down to this step. But I wanted to show it just so you've seen it. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply this out. A lot of times I draw my arrows and stuff, but I'm not going to do that here. I'm just going to multiply these things out. So p times p is p squared. P times positive 1 is plus 1p, and I'm going to just throw the 1s in there. So I have negative 1 times p is negative 1p, and then negative 1 times 1 is negative 1. And then plus, because I have a plus there, I don't need to put separate like my p minus 1, p plus 1 multiplied out, and then my p plus 3, p minus 2 multiplied out. I don't need to separate those. But when I have a minus sign, it's a different story, which we'll see in one of the upcoming examples. Okay, so p times p is 1p squared. P times negative 2 is negative 2p. Positive 3 times p is positive 3p. And then 3 times negative 2 is negative 6. So that's my numerator. And then my denominator is still p minus 2, p plus 1. And now I'm going to combine like terms. So I have 1p squared here, and I have a plus 1p squared here. And that's my only p squared, so 1 plus 1 is 2. So I have 2p squared. And then I have all my p's. So I have plus 1p, minus 1p, minus 2p, plus 3p. So 1 minus 1 is 0. 0 minus 2 is negative 2. Negative 2 plus 3 is negative 1. I don't have to put the 1. I can just put negative p. You can put the 1 in there if you want. I'm not going to. And then negative 1 minus 6 is negative 7. All over p minus 2, p plus 1. So what I'm going to try next is I'm going to try to factor my numerator in order to see if it factors and then I could cross something off with the denominator. So I have 2p squared minus p minus 7. I'm going to factor that out. I need two numbers that multiply to 14, and those same two numbers need to subtract to 1. So my options would be 14 and 1. So 14 times 1 is 14, but 14 minus 1 is 13, not 1. So that won't work. And then I have 7 and 2. So 7 minus 2 is 5. Those are the only things we can do to factor. So since both of those don't work, that means I can't factor my numerator, and I'm just going to leave it as it is. So this is our answer. Let's do the next question. So I just have a 10-minute. Maybe I'll start it, and I might have to finish it in the next video here. Okay. So B is, we have 2 e minus 3, and then I have minus 3e 9 minus e squared. So lots of stuff going on here. So I'm going to put my e minus 3 in brackets. So in order to find my non-permissible values, I want to factor my denominators if I can. So e minus 3, I can't really factor that, but I can factor 9 minus e squared. So I'm going to do that. And this is that a squared minus b squared thing on the far left board here. So when I factor this, I get 3 plus e and 3 minus e. But our issue here is we normally, when we factor things, we want the letter first. We want the e before the 3. So in our case, we can do that. So when I have 3 plus e, I can simply change that to e plus 3 because I can add in any order. Now the next one, because we're subtracting, we have to be careful about the order. So it's like the e is really negative and the 3 is positive. So when I switch those, I get negative e plus 3. So I'm going to be a little fussy again. When we factor, we don't like to have a negative sign in there. This negative sign, we don't really like it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to factor a negative out. So pen, where's my red pen? So I'm going to take this out, and that's not what I wanted. So I'm going to take this negative out of the e, and I also need to take a negative out of my plus 3. So what this is going to become, and I'm going to put it in the very front. So I'm going to have e plus 3, and then I have e, and then positive 3 taking a negative out as I have e minus 3. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to rewrite my rational expression with my new denominators. So the 2 and then the e minus 3 stays the same. And then I have minus 3e, and then this changes to negative e plus 3, e minus 3. Okay, so I'm going to pause there, and we'll continue this in the next video.